I told you all that I was going to end this year off with a bang. That I was going to bring with you the return of the band review. Now, I will first tell you that this is going to be a short-lived return, as this may be the final band review for a while, but this is one that needs to be done. This is one that has been swimming around my system probably for about 3 years now. I've actually reviewed one of the albums by this band in that time frame on my old channel, Coverkiller, and ever since then it's been kind of just left up in the air. This band has made another list. I'm not going to tell you which one, but it has made it. But this is a band that we need to talk about. This is a band that I need to give my opinion about. And this is a video that isn't going to make me very many friends. It's time for us to do the band review of the band Slayer. Now, Slayer is, of course, has many accolades to their credit. They are a member of the Fab Four of thrash. Oh, did I say Fab? I mean Big Four. Sorry about that. They are a keynote member of that. Definitely one of the bands that is the longest running, that has also brought one of the most sizable audiences over to the genre of heavy metal, probably this side of Metallica. This is also a band that has probably released more albums than most, and also has had kind of their history dictates kind of opinion. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. But we're here to talk about this band as a whole. We're not here to talk just about the first couple of albums in this band's discography. We're not here just to talk about the classic era. And as I'm saying these words, the look on your face, the tone that you have should be getting a little bit more fearful. Because that means that perhaps CoverkillerNation, maybe he doesn't like Slayer all that much. Maybe there's a problem here. Now, for the very first time, I have to say it's a split decision, but at the same time, it is all based upon and dependent upon which era we're talking about. Whenever Slayer came out of the gates, whenever Slayer were first starting to make music in the 1980s, all the way up until, I would say, probably Divine Intervention in the middle part of the 1990s, these guys were able to showcase a hell of a lot of skill, a hell of a lot of talent, and we're showing a lot of people out there that were perhaps experiencing their first foray into heavy music what it's all about, what thrash metal is all about, the speed, the veracity, just the breakneck pace, the absolute insanity that this genre of music is able to showcase its listeners. It's able to really combine all of that quickness and that anger of punk music combined with technical guitar work and phenomenal solos, at some points seeming to exceed making sense, and just these absolutely erratic, angry, disgruntled sounding vocals that just seem to come out of nowhere and talk about those taboo topics that are mentioned very, very seldomly. However, these are topics that are being mentioned over and over again. Albums such as South of Heaven, Rain and Blood, Haunting the Chapel, Seasons in the Abyss will, on many people's radars, rank as among some of the best works of all time. And this is just not just people who are just akin with thrash metal, but these are typically on a lot of different lists, whether it be the best of all of metal or maybe the best of all time in music, period, because these are albums that broke some boundaries, kind of stepped it up a little bit, and were able to push into new territory, which has been an endless supply of inspiration for bands that have proceeded after Slayer and have started their own musical journey. So Slayer could be seen by many as a principal influence and a principal reason why they themselves have gotten into the craft. For this, we are very thankful. For this, we definitely have a lot of bands that we perhaps may worship today. And for this reason, thrash metal is still viable and still very, very alive. Not all because of Slayer, but they're definitely playing a part. Many, many bands from many different axes of the music universe, not just the metal universe, will cite Slayer as a principal topic or a influence, and it's something that you're not necessarily going to see just in heavy metal, and that is what gives Slayer's reach a lot of power. However, whenever you talk about the music, whenever you move on beyond Divine Intervention, that is where things seem to take a cataclysmic and seismic twist to the negative, and this is kind of weird, and this is kind of something that is a little bit perplexing, rather alarming, and perhaps one of the guiltiest moments, or the guiltiest parties involved in this particular event, is the concept of time. Slayer's music has always been one that has maintained its consistency throughout the years. It's always been one that has been extremely hyper-aggressive, that has always had those keynote moments on it. And really diverting from this in any sort of fashion almost involved a tremendous risk. Because by taking away those principal Slayerisms, as you could call them, away from the music, or only applying them in ginger doses as opposed to overdosing on them, was primed to have a lot of people either very concerned about the band or very angry about the album. They began to expect, since Slayer kind of did this same sound with minor tweaks and deviations throughout the first part of their career, for every album to really reflect that. Many bands have been able to do away with this concept and kind of do their own thing. Slayer has principally always remained being Slayer, with the exception of how the songwriting has sort of been effective, perhaps after the year 1995. With the album Undisputed Attitude, they decided to do a lot of punk covers. They decided to really kind of downplay their sound a little bit in order to kind of pay tribute a little bit. And this idea is principally kind of neat, because this is not something that you really see all of that often. I mean, we did see with S&M, Metallica kind of showcase that they do have a little bit of a root there, but you also saw a lot more, at least on that album, a lot more tributes to bands such as Queen, bands such as Rainbow with Stone Cold Crazy, and then members of the new wave of British heavy metal with Diamond Head, for example. With Slayer, instead, they traced their roots back to that punk sound, and they were able to craft a covers album that was kind of unique and interesting, almost like Slayer's take on some of their favorite songs. And for a semi-covers album, you have to say that the idea and the concept is rather interesting. But after that, with albums such as Diabolus and Musica, it just really seemed to go downhill and take a turn for the worse. Something seemed to happen. It's almost like time itself had just erased Slayer from the collective memory bank, because the music seemed to definitely take a turn for the simpler and duller. And by duller, I don't mean that they didn't have that same uncompromising, brutal speed. All of the Slayerisms of prior albums certainly exist on these albums that have preceded, Diabolus and Musica, and moving onward into other albums from the 2000s, including their most recent World Painted Blood. But it just doesn't seem like it had that same punch, that same poignancy, that same potency. Almost as though history and Slayer themselves had crafted such an uncompromisingly positive and fantastic first half of their career that there was absolutely no way in hell, heaven, limbo, or earth that they were going to be able to follow it up with the second half of their career. And that is definitely apparent. Albums such as God Hates Us All do have their thunderous moments, but at the same time, there's just a lot of drivel, a lot of typicality, a lot of things that you basically are just used to. And at this point in time, in listening to Slayer, you almost expect to hear something a little bit mind-bending, a little bit genre-twisting. Something that is going to take this genre, this thrash band, and this thrash idea to the next level, to the new horizons that perhaps had been painted forth on the Sistine Chapel ceiling of thrash metal with their very first half of their career. It's almost as though they did so much to kind of change the game a little bit while still sticking tried and true to an idea that was shared by many at this particular point in time in the late 1980s, that there was not much more that could really be done. Instead, they were only left to try to build upon it, and instead didn't really do that. This band has a lot of positive aspects. But this band also has the one thing that plagues a lot of bands that tend to be either overrated or have fallen on sometimes, where they've fallen out of favor from a lot of people that perhaps either liked them once in the past. Either that, or a lot of fans that just seem like they feel that the most recent incantations of the band and the most recent albums by these bands have been less than stellar. There has been a large Slayer fan base, and this is something that will continue onward until the day that they die and far on afterwards. And that's something that's very good for metal. It's something very good for the band. It's something very good for thrash. It shows that that old school idea is still alive and well. you see a big youth movement pointing towards Slayer too. Slayer is still a band that a lot of people will want to listen to because it is rendered by most as taboo. However, this is something where the fans are also kind of like a die-by-the-sword type thing. If you have a negative opinion about this band, if you just express your opinion and it doesn't match theirs, they tend to be very, very monochrome about it. It's either their way or the highway. And while music is something where if you have a love for a band, it's cool to defend it, but at the same time, you have to sort of see things from the other coin. I know that not everybody's going to love a band such as Opeth or Agalloch or even Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden definitely has a lot of people that are not fans of them either, but Slayer fans seem to take this to a new level. Pantera fans are kind of guilty of this too, but I'm focusing on Slayer because, well, they almost take it to the ridiculous and the stupid. They almost take it to the point where it's just not fun anymore to even put up an argument, because basically all they seem to be doing throughout the arguments is going, fuck you, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're an idiot, fuck you, I'm gonna kill you, fuck you, that's Slayer. And that right there is one of the principal reasons why it is A, stupid to have an argument with a Slayer fan, B, incredibly annoying to have an argument with a Slayer fan, and C, I just don't encourage it, period. Not because you can't win, because if they're just doing that, then you've already won, but also, these are people that are unwilling to kind of sway or see things from another side. This isn't something where these are guys that are listening to nothing but Slayer and they're not willing to expand their horizons a bit. Usually these guys tend to have great musical taste. But at the same time, they're taking their musical taste and their musical love for one band to way over the extreme. Is this the reason why I don't like this band? Actually, no. This isn't the reason why Slayer and I just don't get along. I love the aggressive style of Slayer from the 1980s and the first part of the 1990s. I really like a lot of that work. That chaos, that's just revolutionary. It's almost like taking a time machine back into that time frame. Remembering whenever I was just but a young CoverkillerNation and wondering what it would have been like if I was a much older CoverkillerNation. Like my age today. If I were that age, this age should I say, at that time period, I would probably love this. This would be something where if CoverkillerNation existed in the 1980s in some form of weird VHS tape trading thing, I'd probably be all out talking about how Slayer is a band that is definitely pushing boundaries and doing a lot of great things for this genre of metal that seems to be budding and branching out and really becoming very universal, where we're seeing, you know, a lot of upstarts from the Florida scene doing this new thing called death metal. We're seeing perhaps the earliest incantations of black metal with bands such as Hellhammer or things like that, you know, where we're also hearing terrific releases by other bands and so on and so forth. But this Slayer band, there's something about these guys. Something about these guys that is really going to attract a lot of attention. It just seems like after 1995, it just seems like after the release of Diabolus and Musica that this band just doesn't stimulate very much anymore for me. This is a band that definitely doesn't seem to have that same it factor for me anymore, and it's probably because I listen to the music, I listen to the songs, and nothing grabs me like that early stuff did. That early stuff had that raw ability to pull you in, to take you on this ride that felt a little taboo, but whenever you were a part of this metal thing, whenever you didn't give two twats what somebody thought about what they thought about you, whenever it came to your religion or your orientation or this or that, you didn't give two shits. You just wanted to read up about all this stuff. You wanted to become educated. You wanted to just thrash your motherfucking neck off. If you woke up the next morning and your neck didn't hurt, it wasn't a good enough night. That didn't have that same power after Diabolus. And ever since then, even with World Painted Blood, even with God Hates Us All, even with Christ Illusion, name the album, it hasn't had that same potency. And you know what? For some strange reason, people still defend this band to the death, even though they cannot recognize the fact that that is true. They go to shows to still hear the stuff that is principally from the first half of their career. The second half is only bits and pieces. You go to a Slayer show to hear Rain and Blood. You go to a Slayer show to hear songs from that side, you know, whether it be Dead Skin Mask or Seasons in the Abyss, whether it be, you know, other songs from that variety. That is what you go for the most part. If you're going to hear God Hates Us All, that's understandable. But it isn't principally what you're going to see. You want to see the spectacle. You want to see what caused this sort of seismic change. What caused people to be fearful about this band, what caused mothers to cry whenever they found out that their children were listening to this devilish band called Slayer. That same effect, that same feel is no longer there. That power has been disintegrated. That candle has been blown out, so to speak. And because of that, and because of the way in which these people are really handling this band for me has not clicked. This band for me has not stayed. I can admit greatness when I see it. I can admit great eras when I see it. And there was a tremendously great era for Slayer. But right now, and ever since Diabolus Musica, we have been in an era that has been marred by a dark cloud. One that doesn't seem to have that same potency. Even though God Hates Us All was released on the same day as September 11th, I don't feel that same amount of, curious fear as I did the first time I heard the early work. There's that curious fear that overcomes you whenever you listen to it for the first time. Because you hear all of these stories, you hear all of these legends, you hear all of the warnings, and you think to yourself, what am I getting myself into? That didn't even happen whenever that album was set to be released on the same day as one of the most brutal, one of the most tragic, and one of the most real pure evidences that there is no God that Americans have ever had to face. And I didn't feel that same fear, and I don't think a lot of people did. There you go. If you need any more reason, I don't know what you want to have heard. If you're a fan of this band, that's cool. I'm not trying to attack everybody. It's not really my point and purpose here. I'm reflecting my own opinion. Yours is fine. That's what makes us unique. That's what makes us humans. That's what makes us individuals. I applaud individuality whenever it is not with impure motive. Impure motive, individuality, is not individuality. That's instead just following a sheep herder and going, bah. Don't be one of those. Really don't. This is a band that has oodles and oodles of great material for you to sift through. Does it mean that you should treat them as some sort of sensationalists? No. Because that era is long gone. And until an album comes that maybe showcases that same amount of emotion, or until they take that leap, they finally do a little something to tweak it that really, really tends to make it over the top once again, my feeling really isn't going to change. There you go. You want to know how I feel about Slayer? I just told you in however many minutes this video is. I await your comments.